Good morning. I don't know how, after 430 years, 430 years, 4 centuries, plus 3 decades, how any Jewish family in biblical days, Bible days, could not constantly talk about the magnitude of Exodus. Maybe they spoke about it at family reunions after Exodus 12. Maybe they spoke about it even in very privatized family moments, birthdays, and other types of celebrations, because they are living for the first time emancipated and free. How do you live all of your days, or the majority of your days, in bondage? And not let that be a part of the family talk that should shape everything that this family does going forward. How do you not do that? Well, in fact, they did in fact do that. Exodus is a memorable book in the annals of Jewish history that I'm sure they never, ever forgot what God did. The book of Numbers is the flip side of the Exodus. If Exodus is the high mark of God's fulfillment, of God's manifestation of his power and his presence and his provisions and his promises, fulfilled right into their optics. They departed Ramses, and do you know that was the first time in their life that they had ever breathed air outside of Egyptian bondage. So it was a moment of celebration. But Numbers is the flip side of that. Numbers says that the whole thing that God did in the Exodus in that generation was nullified, made moot, not wasted, because it's going to be carried out in a different generation, but for that generation, it was as if they could have stayed and died in Egypt. The story of Numbers has to be told about what happened to that generation that came up out of the Egyptian slavery. 70 souls turns into, well, nearly 2 million folk. They're going to do a census in Numbers, about 600,000 young men, and yet adding speculating, reasoning, and rationalizing. Some say about 2 million people are pulling out of that place. And God said to Abram, I'm going to make you the father of a nation that will be as innumerable as the stars. And they're going to be in captive, but I'm going to bring them out. They're going to a land. Numbers is what every child of God needs to read and take seriously. Who's not growing and deepening and reaching convictions. We'll close with that word, convictions, in God's faithfulness. Now, let's look at the story. I'm wondering if we got our slides right. I think we've got, I'll turn around back there. I'll get it fixed up. I knew something was up when I saw part 4. Didn't catch that. Yeah, we'll get it fixed. All right, we'll get it. Okay. Oh, get it. There we go. There we go. Thank you, my brother. We're looking at this trifecta that you should always examine, always explore, always survey when you open any book of the Bible, 66 books. Now, Numbers gives us 36 chapters. Numbers. It also covers 1,288 verses, about 32,000, almost 33,000 words, almost. So here's the question. Big question. Valid, legitimate, necessary. What's in this book that God wants me to understand? We can talk about it collectively, congregationally, but let's talk about it personally. What is it God is speaking to Van, my name, your name in this book, that I can apply to my life? We're going to make it very plain in this 2-week focus. And as God gives me opportunity to share with others. What do these 36 chapters, 36 chapters, nearly 1,300 verses, nearly 33,000 words, what are they revealing that can bless my life? And the word is supposed to be a blessing, not a curse. That they can bless my life in time and prepare me for the final judgment in eternity. That's the burden that we face in this look at Numbers. Now, what we say is there's information. This is repetitious, I know. It's repetitive, I know. But I want this to become so ingrained, embedded entrenched in your mind that you can teach it, you can understand it, that whatever I open, even in the New Testament books, I'm looking for information, I'm looking for instruction, and I'm looking for insights, whatever knowledge of some of the basic facts of the Bible. That's information. Instruction, doctrinal truths, doctrine, dogma. And I need to practice. And then what about my personal struggles? What about the way the enemy is coming at me? What about what's happening in my family, my marriage, my singleness, my budget, my finances, my body? How does this book speak to that? Information, instructions, and insights. So let's unpack that in the context of Numbers. By now, you know, maybe prior, that the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, formed a kind of biblos, a Bible in itself. This was called the Pentateuch, the book of the 5, or the Torah. And that whole Jewish economy, spiritually, economically, was based on what was in the Torah. Oh, that would have the prophets, the Psalms, but everything harked back to this 5-book volume. They hung their hat on that. Maybe Gentiles, before they were grafted in, could get some understanding of the meditation of the Psalms and the wisdom of Proverbs. But none of this in the first 5 books was directed to them. They were on the outside, looking in. Jews hung their hat on the fact that this was the book of God to us exclusively. So when we come to this 4th book of the Bible, 4th book of the Pentateuch, we're talking about a big-time book. Who wrote it? Well, you know by now, Moses. We've proven that in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Let's now validate it in Numbers. He's the author. Moses is referenced. He's called out. He's pointed out as keeping a historical record of the events listed in Numbers. This is in the internal structure of the book, Numbers 33:2. Now Moses wrote down, there it is, wrote down the starting points of the journeys. Journeys, this is what the book is about, the journeys, the renderings, the trek, the travels. He wrote it down. He kept the record, very meticulous. The book chronicles what happened, when it happened, why it happened. Joshua was an eyewitness, a mentor, who was schooled at the feet of Moses. In fact, something happens in Numbers that's also chronicled, not just in Joshua chapter 1, when God says, hey, Moses is dead, you're up. And that begins in the book of Numbers, where he's appointed as the successor of Moses. This is a book of transitions. This is a book of a change, as it were, from the first generation to the second generation. So Joshua says, as it is written in the book of the law. The book is not any one particular book, but the 5-book volume of the Pentateuch. It's written in the book that was known as the book of the law. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. He calls it the law of Moses. He's the author. Now, we want to make sure we know who wrote it, when it was written, to whom it was written, why it was written, but also, when was it written? Now, this is not minor. This is not a small point. This is information that you ought to know. That this covers this 1400s period, 1400s BC, somewhere between 1445, 1405, Moses is writing this history. Numbers was written during the 40 years, 40, of Israel's wanderings in the wilderness, most likely written just before he departed this world. He's putting that final ink written down in the book of Numbers. This is not long before he's taken out of the world. He writes down this history. He's been writing it, now he compiles it, finalizes it. Now, let's break it down internally. It's just information. We're opening up the 66 books of the Bible. This is information. If you're reading Numbers 1 through 14, this takes place the second year of the Exodus. What are going to get in those chapters? 14 chapters, but really 1 year, a year that's momentous in the life and legacy of that generation. Because something happens at the end of that first section, chapter 14 begins in 13, that changes everything for this generation. Something happens there. We're going to bring it out. You may be very familiar with it. There was a judgment, there was a rejection, there was a condemnation, there was a choice that God made, irreversible, unchangeable. And they never, ever recovered from that. That's chapter 1 through 14. Never recovered. Never got it back. This plays out in the wanderings. There was a word, there was a message of God that you can't overlook in the wilderness, or you won't get to Canaan. Now, Numbers 15 through 36 details the remaining, let's say 38, 39 years. It just plays out what Numbers 14 declares. It just kind of unfolds. We know what is going to happen based on Numbers 13 and 14 with this first generation. And in Numbers 15 through 36, we see it being played out in live and living color. Now, to whom was it written? Well, remember who wrote it? Moses. When was it written? During the wilderness. Primarily, it's a book of remembrance for the second generation connected with the Exodus. This book is really not written to the first generation. They're on their way out. This is for their children. They need to know why their parents are walking around going nowhere fast. They need to know what happened from Exodus 12, that's the Exodus out of Egypt, to Numbers 14. That's when it imploded. You know, you can't just have word of mouth because people can get it mixed up. People can get it turned around. Folklore. Sometimes families pass on things that they really don't know why they're passing on. Have you heard the story about the woman who, you might have heard the story, who was cooking and she always would cut, the end of the meat off and put it in the pot. You ever heard that story? You heard that story? And so, she would pass on that story to her. This is how you really get it cooked right. Got to cut it off. But she didn't really know that actually, going back, it was only being cut because it had to fit that pot. Had nothing to do with the taste, had nothing to do with grandma's old time cooking. But she would always hack it off because this is what grandma taught us. But grandma just had a limited pot, baby. So things get passed on. Things get lost along the way. And God says you can't forget this. So Numbers 10, 11 through 12, 10, 11 through 12, listen what it says. Now it came to pass in the 20th day, the second month, in the second year, this is after the Exodus, the second year, suddenly something happens. Leviticus plays out at Mount Sinai without mobility, without movement. They never moved. Numbers, the journey picks up, not away from Egypt, but to the promised land. Can I make something very, very valid to you, what Numbers is going to teach you? God is not only trying to bring you from, but take you to. Some people only want to be taken from the mess, from the burden, from the trial. And then they say to God, stand down, I got it. But God says, I'm trying to take you to. No. That's what happened. That's what plays out. They wanted from, but not to. So we're in the second year. The cloud was taken from the tabernacle, and the children of Israel set out, there it is, from the wilderness of Sinai. That's where they've been throughout the whole book of Leviticus, right there at that mountain on the journeys. Now, the second generation, go back now, second generation, the journeys, we want you to know. See, some of them were just knee high. Some of them were teens. Some of them didn't understand at all what was happening. Some of them were in their younger up years, but not that connected. They need to have a record of how this went down, how this played out, how this unfolded. But that generation that comes up out of their parents' experience was a remarkable generation, Nick. Almost unparalleled in Jewish history, in their faithfulness and their fearfulness to God. That generation. Remember, it says that they served God all the days of Joshua, talking about this second generation, and even the elders that outlived. This was a remarkable generation, almost unparalleled in Jewish history. Remember, after that generation dies, the judges, right? And it goes south. Kings, it goes even more south. Now, so this is also written to those generations after the second generation. Let's call them the generation of the Jews. Here it is. Go back. for God's covenant people in the dispensation of the Old Testament. Numbers 36:13, these are the commandments and judgments which the Lord commanded the children of Israel by the hand of Moses. Now, this is even for the generation after that second generation. This is what they're being told. This is how it played out. This is the tragedy. How could you blow this Exodus promise? How could you mess that up? How could you go from slavery to damnation? How does that work out? In generations of the Jewish people, on down to the days of Jesus, living under the law, needed to know what happened there. And then even for us today, it's written to us, for the things written aforetime were written for our what? Learning. We're going to close out with that. Numbers is required reading for anybody that wants to say, I can get by without God. No. I only need God to take me so far. Numbers is required. I only need God to get me out of the mess. Numbers says, watch it now. It's a bad, bad outcome. This is to whom it was written. Why was it written? Here it is. It's going to give the message that the faithlessness, I don't know how any more real to call it, faithlessness, ingratitude, and rebellious nature of that first generation of Exodus who remained in the wilderness. Wilderness, see that? The wilderness, 45 times that appears in this book. Repetitious. Why did they come out of Egypt and did not make it any further than the wilderness? Church, we're going to go next week into teaching. The wilderness is very, very problematic, but purposeful. I don't think God can grow me without a wilderness experience. I don't think he can grow me. I don't think he can mature me without a wilderness experience. There are things you've got to learn, not in Canaan, but in the wilderness. In fact, there are certain things that if I don't learn in the wilderness, I can't make it to Canaan. Wilderness learning is problematic, but purposeful, necessary. I don't know any child of God who hasn't gone through the wilderness. Doesn't feel good, doesn't taste good, doesn't look good. You can't make the wilderness paradise, even on your most optimistic day. But it has a reason, it has a purpose, it has a plan here. 45 times in Numbers, my sister, the wilderness. There's a point being made here, the wilderness. Can I tell you something to you? Somebody is blowing in the wilderness. That's the first generation. But somebody is learning in the wilderness. That's the second generation. Somebody says, I'm getting this. I'm learning this. I'm receiving this. I'm okay with this. They had a rebellious streak. They had a rebellious nature. I was thinking about that in the office this morning, just thinking about this again before I came down. And it just suddenly hit me that God doesn't say what's not going to happen. You know, Jeremy, he did not say that that generation was going to Canaan. Suddenly it hit my head. He did say they're coming out of Egypt. But he didn't make false promises. He knew what Moses is going to know. In fact, you know, he tells that generation for a while, remember, my people, and then it changes your people. Your folks. I already made a decision about them. The rejection of faith, the disregard of the faithfulness of God, sealed their rejection by God and their condemnation. Can we say that again? The rejection of faith. Faith is going to be tested in the wilderness. Sickness, trauma, reversals, accidents, disease, pathologies, chronic conditions, mistreatment, all of that. Waiting, whoa, that's a difficult one. All of it's in the wilderness. Faith is going to be tested. In fact, when we get to Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2, you ought to mark that verse, we'll get to that. He says, all these years I've tested you in the wilderness. I've tested you in the wilderness. Now, Numbers 13, 14, everything changes. That's the spies. That's the refusal to go any further to Canaan. Why was it written? Well, you're going to see in Numbers 15 through 20, more disobedience that affirms the justness of God's wrath and punishment. This is where Korah loses his mind. This is where some of the priests lose their way. And suddenly, like Abram found out, when God makes a call on Sodom and he's just, he's legit. You're going to see that play out in Numbers 15 through 20. See, I'm telling you, Nick, as you think about it, I just don't know how many Jewish homes spoke about the Numbers narrative as much as the Exodus, and yet they needed to. They needed to talk about Numbers. Numbers 21 through 36. A transition to a new generation, a people ready and willing to trust and obey God and lay hold on what God has promised. The whole thing changes to a new generation. Let me close with this. We'll get into the instructions and the insights next time, part 2. We'll really, truly have to open our hearts and minds to see the tragedy that unfolds. The absolute tragedy, the utter catastrophe, the absolutely waste of that divine promise, just wasted. Like Esau just wasted it. They wasted it. Counted it as nothing. Instructions, this is what makes Numbers required reading. No, it's not a bad book. It's a book about bad stuff that we don't want to happen to us. It's not a bad book. It's a good book about bad stuff that you don't want, and it won't happen to you. You're better than that. But here it is. Losing sight of God's truths that should no longer be doubted or denied going forward. There was a point in which, my brother Ali, that God says, Van, you see, even before we got to the wilderness, you learned some things about me in Egypt. Egypt is when you were in your worst case scenario, under satanic control. You learned my love, my mercy, my grace, my salvation, my deliverance. You learned all of it back then. So when you get into the wilderness, you got to draw on what you learned in Egypt. Can I tell you something, church? Can I tell you something? Can I tell you something? Can I tell you something? Can I whisper it to you? They didn't learn anything in Egypt. Nothing. No, let me say it like we said, say when we get really educated, nothing. They learned nothing in Egypt. Nothing. That came out of, how do you know that? Right after the Red Sea parted. You remember that? Whoa, this is deep. But what about those onions, leeks, scallops? He ain't learning nothing. I ain't learning nothing. It's not registering. God is taking notes. There was a point in my life, church, a point in my life that I don't have the luxury of doubting God anymore because he's brought me too far. I don't have the luxury of even questioning God because he's done been good to me. A point in my family that we've got to hold on to God's unchanging hand because it's the hand of God that did these things, that fed Makata and Vanessa, that kept us clothed and kept us moving forward, that provided for us, and you know what I'm talking about. So when we go through this moment, we don't have the luxury to doubt God. We don't have the prerogative to stand and pull God into the courtroom and say, let me put you on trial. That's what they're going to do in Numbers. God's on trial again. He's going to call it the Massa, the trial that God did not show up. Insights, we're going to get this. It's the promise of penalty. He puts a binary choice between us. Promise or penalty. Promise or penalty. This verse is one that every family needs to read more often. I don't know if you have. It should be a part of the family devotion sometimes. It should be a part of the family devotion sometimes. This is what you should send your daughters away to college and your sons away to college on. This is what you should say to those young adults who are starting a new life. This is what you even say to your parents who are slipping into a different season, mentally, emotionally. You can draw back to this. The Lord bless you and keep you. This is out of Numbers. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. That's the ideal. And make his countenance shine upon you and give you peace. That's the ideal. That's the ideal. That's the sweet spot. But you know what, sister? Do you know what, as I close? That didn't register. That didn't connect. That didn't really impact that generation. One of my favorite Hollywood movies, I love that movie, I'm just telling you. Angie, I used to watch it so much. Angie said, man, we can't watch it anymore. She forbade me to watch it anymore. I just thought the acting was good, the bad seed. Yeah, the old version. Yeah, I don't know what the new one is. That girl was something, maybe. That girl was something else. You ever watch it about bad seed? Man, that sister girl was bad seed, man. And you know, the scenes are just so remarkable. And I tell you, even, the little janitor kind of got her working, and she said, oh, man, don't mess with me. Hey, don't play with me. I'm a bad hombre here. You know what? That's not you. No, I'm going to make sure you know. I'm coming through. I'm going to make sure you know. Do you know what Numbers reveals? Outside of Joshua and Caleb, every one of them were bad seeds. Woo! Every one of them. They were the only one that made it. Every one of them were bad seeds. And this is a book that we need. We just need to tighten our grip and say, it's going to be tight, but it's right. I got to get in there and study this book because it's going to keep my family intact. It's going to keep me from losing my way. It's going to keep me from losing my stuff. As Nick comes back, I thought I had brought it. I just need to. As Brother Nick comes back, I want you to, the article here, it's in the bulletin. I want to see this. is about assessing our standards for worship. That's what Leviticus is about. Let me go back. It's about worship. Worship. God says we're not going any further until you get worship. Here, no, right here. Get worship. In an earlier season of my life, trained in engineering, I was very much aware of the basic law of entropy. You know, entropy. Entropy means things go from a state of order to disorder. That's why rooms need cleaning, right? They don't just go from clean to clean, they get dirty, dusty. They go from order to order. That's the way God designed it. So that's true scientific, but that's true spiritual. If you don't address stuff, it's going to go from order, it's going to right to bad. I am convinced, that Numbers 13 and 14 was the manifestation, but the problem could be traced back to the Leviticus. They did not know God, honor God, reverence God, or worship God. And they never that right. In the narrative, straight, you gotta get worship. You gotta get some worship. I gotta get my worship. I'm telling you. God bring me to Sinai and said, hey, listen to me. If you're going to get the most, the best, the rest, don't play with worship. Don't mess with that. Don't ever outsource that. Don't ever let the devil intrude into that. And if you get that right, you'll get the rest of it. Don't stop doing it. As we stand right now and offer this invitation song, I want you to think about what we talked about, this tragedy that we're going to unpack next week. I want you to think about your own walk with God. I want you to ask yourself, before you drive out of here at that parking lot, did I come down and acknowledge the need for prayer, for strength, for hope, for deliverance, for whatever? Because there's something that's just not right. It's missing. I can't answer that for you. But maybe it's salvation. Maybe if I die tonight, I know I'm not going to God's place. And I want to be saved tonight. I want to be saved tonight. Hear the word, believe it. Repent, confess, be baptized. Maybe wait, just teach you that. Or maybe I want to confess this. I want to acknowledge this because I don't want to go any further. I don't even want to go into Monday. So right now,